Medical Living with Dr. Bill DEAGLE, and of course we are box agnostics here. I am a Messianic Christian believer that has a, if you want to call it, expanded understanding of our responsibilities as well as our giftings that God's given us. And we're living in a time of what I call cataclysm. We're living in a time of Joseph, the prophecies of the ancient, if you want to call it prophet Joseph, that interpreted for the satrap of Egypt to preserve the people not only of Egypt but also of the tribes of Israel. We're living in a time of a modern, if you want to call it a Moses-type period, where we are in a pre-cataclysmic period of history. We're living in a time which is more dangerous than any other time in history. And in fact, I got an interesting email just a moment ago from Robert K. Vicino, a founder and CEO of the Vivos Group. And the website is TerraVivos, TerraVivos.com. And I'd like to read this letter here as we bring on Dave and Jean on, and it'll be a good platform to kind of start off the discussion. The first email I had was 4 hours ago, and I'll read it. Dr. Bill, I am honored that you applied for Vivos. This is an underground 4-star shelter, basically bunker underground. Obviously, we would love to have you and your family join us, of course, with my skill sets, etc., including nonlinear diagnostics as a surgeon, doctor, etc. I can even do dental work, by the way. What would you be a good time to talk? And, of course, he wants to meet to talk. And then he sent me a link to the Terra Vivos facility underground built from an old German bunker called Europa 1. And it's fabulous. I mean, and this is like a cruise ship underground. It is not claustrophobic. But I want to read the next letter. And it's interesting because it just came in literally 7 minutes ago, which is very timely. And I invited Robert to call into the program. I hope he will, because I just got his email, and I think it's important because people need to understand the how late the hour is. And this is extremely, extremely important for people to understand this. I have a unique position of being a physician classified at the Q level and higher, and having worked with U.S. Space Command, Strategic Defense, and Star Wars, having a background in science that crosses literally every specialty from astrophysics, nuclear physics, chemistry, biology, you name it. I have a degree of mastery or a knowledge of that allows me to integrate it into an overall gestalt of what's going on. And I'll read off the letter. It says, William, I guess his tone is a little different. A friend just sent me 2 short clips of your show from yesterday. That would be the 11th, Thursday. And, of course, we had Professor McCANNEY on the 3rd hour, so it's probably when it was discussed after, actually the 4th hour, which you were in. Here, our Rense Network show. And it said, a friend sent me 2 short clips from yesterday. With all due respect, it appears by your comments that you do not understand how Vivos works and or its purpose. And you promote off-grid generation as though that will save you from the earth changes threats you discussed. How does that work when everything on the surface will be dead, dying, or fighting to survive from whatever the extinction level event was? In question mark. This is a reason the major governments of the world have bunkered up, in exclamation mark. They know what is coming and that nobody will survive on the surface, period. Let's pray that it's not true, comma, but as we all know, the evidence indicates otherwise. Next paragraph. I understand you would not want to live for a prolonged period in an underground shelter, comma, you don't seem to discuss the alternative of not living at all because you don't seek or secure a real shelter to survive. Really? Question mark. You would rather die than live in a 4-star nuclear blast-proof underground shelter? Question mark. Vivos is not about locking down for a year maximum, not multi-generational periods of time, in brackets, because we choose to. It's about having to seek shelter, comma, versus trying to survive from the certain hellish events going on above. We have no desire to stay in the shelter for 1 minute longer than is necessary to safely and securely survive. Better yet, we hope that the Vivos shelter never need to be activated, but that doesn't seem likely with what is going on around the world. At least Vivos members will have the choice of heading to their shelter and be assured of the best chance of surviving what may be ahead. Actually, I want, if he's listening, or if this clip is later, I think that, Robert, you need to understand, I believe in what I call levels of protection. And I actually promote the underground bunkered shelters. I call that level 3. Level 1 is get out of the big cities and get in a gated community, a distance away from the city where you can still work. Level 2 is have a community where people are working to protect each other that are on the ground, but in an area that's not downwind of a nuclear reactor, not in a tsunami zone, not on the coast where anything catastrophic can happen, and perhaps not in America, but in some place where it's relatively safe, Ecuador, Patagonia, whatever. Level 3, though, if things get bad enough, is you have to go underground. And, we can only have bunkers, but we have cave systems across the Midwest United States from Tennessee and Ohio, etc., that literally go for thousands of miles. Those could be converted to bunkers. We have bunkered facilities that the U.S. government's made from dormant magma domes or matrix cities using sodium-cooled nuclear reactors. There's surface bunkers that are literally relatively not that deep that you can purchase. They're made of former containers. There's old bunkers that were created, like this one, Europa one in Germany. I believe that we will have enough time in between to be able to have our Terra Vivos bunker, if you have skill sets or the finances to do so. But I think that we need to set it up as levels. And there's going to be lots of what I call marker points. In other words, times where you're going to be able to know what's next. And what's next needs to have multiple levels. In other words, right now I have a 20 kilowatt propane generator. I have backup water collection by roof water systems. I've actually do ground penetrating radar to get water here. But at some point, I'm going to have to leave my beautiful home here in Southern California and head to a multi-home facility where multiple people, including military personnel, are protecting us from roving gangs of maniacs. But if things get bad enough, we have to leave even that multi-home facility and go to an underground bunker. And if you don't have that, what I call 3 levels, you're not going to survive. So talking about level 2, I'm in a level 1 facility, and the guy that got that for me was Dave and Jean Mitchell. Welcome to the program. Dave and Jean, I think, are you there?
She's not right now. I'm not sure if she'll make it before the show's over, but...
she's elsewhere. Okay, well, Dave, I will make up the dead air in between. Don't worry about it. What I want you to do is, you're very brilliant in terms of prepping, but also you're a brilliant realtor. You got me our home and studios here in Southern California, and I consider this my level 1 retreat. We're outside the cities. We're up on the mountains. It's actually very defensible if somebody decided, like 3 years ago, I had a number of calls coming in from a series of individuals that thought it was a good idea to give death threats to me and my family. We have Richard, I think he says Richard, but it's actually Robert K. Vicino. Robert, are you there?
I am.
Oh, wonderful. Listen, I read your letter online that you sent me, and I think it was very appropriate because I could see your shock having just a kind of a selected clip. I really strongly believe in what you're doing. And I want you to kind of lay out why you have the Vivo shelters. I don't know if you've listened to my show before, but I'll give you a bit of my background. I was recruited out of grade 11 to go to MIT in nuclear physics because I taught myself quantum mechanics. I had a special scholarship. I finished my PhD in marine molecular biology at 21 and 5 months. Didn't write the thesis, but went into medicine, graduated at 24. Have been in practice since 27 after a 3-year residency in family and internal medicine, done everything from surgery of every kind except an open heart and brain, trauma emergency burn unit, and had Q-level security clearance with the U.S. government, working on classified projects including Operation Top Off and Dark Winter, and took care of U.S. Space Command, Strategic Defense, Star Wars, NORAD, and our off-world space projects, and things that cannot be worse than people can imagine. In fact, I tell them 10% of what I know, which is pretty catastrophically nasty, about what's really going on in the world. And I believe that what you're doing is what I call the final common solution to things that are so hellish, you have to go underground. So I believe in what you're doing. But I want you to raise the issues about why you set up Terra Vivos. You're the founder and CEO, and what issues you see are driving us toward this, what we call extinction level event.
Thanks, Bill. Well, first of all, you would have one of the finest...
You want to get a little closer to the mic. I want everybody to hear you because we're broadcasting on Rense Network, which is a huge network.
I understand. How's this?
A little closer, a little louder. Turn it up, or maybe in the studio you can turn it up some.
You know what? I'm on a cell phone with a headset. Let me, if you don't mind, call you right back from a landline with a headset. And
that'll be wonderful. And we're going to also have our prepper expert, Dave Mitchell, here, too, because he's what I call our level 1 and 2 expert. You're the level 3 expert. Level 3, by the way, is, 3 strikes you're out. If you don't have level 3 when things really get hellish, you're dead, and your family's dead. And you have to realize that things could get that bad that much of the human race is wiped out, just like the 75,000-year-old disaster of the Malaysian supervolcano going off, Tumba, which destroyed not only all the native peoples in North America, because 75,000 years ago there was a large native population. They were completely destroyed and wiped out by the Tumba explosion 75,000 years ago. So, Robert will be back on the line here in just a second. It's Robert K. Vicino, and again, the website, Great, Robert, we have you back on the landline. Let's see what the sound like is now.
Yeah, well, I hope it's better.
Yeah, it is better, but maybe you can turn it up a bit from the studios there so I can hear you a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it's at your end.
Oh, good. Okay, that's good. Okay, Robert, tell us about why you founded Terra Vivos, and what do you think are the key issues that are driving us to an extinction level event?
Well, just turn on your daily news and look around. The signs are there. It's almost impossible to ignore them any longer, but certain people do still have their head in the sand. And I like to say putting your head in the sand and ignoring the reality is not going to save your ass, which is hanging out above.
Exactly, yeah. Now, let's parse that down to be much more specific. And I don't know if you listen to my program, but the NUTRIMEDICAL Report Clay and Iron Show is the most radical show on any network on radio or television on planet Earth by a very large, many-dimensional levels, both physical, technological, above government technology, and spiritual. And there's so many converging events. We have it's like going to a restaurant that's very fine, but it's got a menu so long it takes you a half hour to select even the entrees. There's so many converging reasons why things are disastrous at multiple levels, from economic, geopolitical, climatic, near space objects. Just a month ago, we had a 2.5 mile across asteroid that zipped past the Earth at just a couple lunar distances. And, of course, I know taking care of employees at U.S. Space Command, they supposedly monitor down everything to the size of a pencil eraser, but they miss giant objects that pass less than the LD or lunar distance to the Earth. And these objects carry off in a debris field that can be very catastrophic, like the asteroid that came in and landed in southern Russia a few years ago and caused a major air explosion like the Tunguska explosion. That one that was 2.5 miles across would have created an explosion roughly 1,000 times worse than Tunguska that flattened 100,000 square acres of land, miles of land in Siberia back in 1910. So if you were to list the, let's say, bullet points, the top 3 or 4 issues, and what their physiological or Earth consequences are, what would you say the top, say, 3 are?
Well, let me back up 30 years and tell you what the inspiration was for building Vivos in the first place. I was in my young 20s, and I got this inspiration / I would almost call it a vision. And right. Let's just say it was a message from God. I was very successful. I had 100 employees before I was 25, and yet I got this message that I had to build a shelter for thousands of people deep underground for something that was coming our way. All right? Now, the key word there is coming our way.
Right.
From where? And this was well before I knew anything about Nibiru, Planet X, 2012, the Mayans, any of this stuff.
So what you're saying is you actually your spirit reached into the continuum, and you had wisdom before you had knowledge.
That's a good way of putting it, Bill. But let's say you're absolutely right. I did not have the skills or knowledge of how to carry out that task.
Right.
And so I shared it with a few friends, and they said, this is crazy. This stuff will never happen. And I tucked it away, and about 5 years later, I mentioned it again. And each time I did over the last 30 years, I got the same response until about 2007, and my associate said, wow, Robert, now is the time. You've got to do this. Let's go. And, that's when I finally got the gut feeling that it is time, and I couldn't waste any more time. I had to proceed. So we did. We launched Vivos. Our mission is to build as many deep underground, nuclear blast-proof shelters as we can while we still have time. But back to your question of what do I believe I believe something's inbound. I believe it's going to be catastrophic. And, despite everybody's got a different opinion about Nibiru, let me just remind you that in January of 1983, U.S. News and World Report, front cover, Nibiru Planet X found. And NASA found it with the IRAS telescope, which was the infrared spectrum.
Yeah.
And shortly thereafter, though, they realized that it could create mass hysteria to continue to discuss it. Ronald Reagan signed an executive order to assure that no government official ever discussed it again. So, but from that date forward, they started bunkering up. They started digging in. And they have dug in, and they have massive shelters and tunnels all across the country. The Russians have, the Chinese have.
Everybody
most major
does.
governments do, yeah.
And even smaller governments you wouldn't think have bunkers everywhere. Or they've taken cave systems and converted them to bunkers.
Well, the problem with a cave system is you really don't know structurally how it's going to
exactly. Yeah. You have to build actually a structure inside it that can withstand even the falling of the cave debris on your head, because you don't have a structurally stable, maybe just limestone.
That's right. And so, but let me also say that, we've had direct contact with the head of security for people like Bill Gates and others, and they all have shelters. In fact, they have multiple shelters. So,
in fact, if you're to give a percentage of the billionaires that are in the know, what I've heard is at least half of them already have very extensive, what I call, like cruise ships underground. Let's put it that way. It would be the best description.
Well, they do. Under their homes, they have safe rooms. CNBC has done various shows about that. And, in fact, you mentioned earlier about our Europa One, which was just announced today by Forbes magazine. That is a billionaire's bunker. And the reason is it's so big. It's 250,000 square feet, 5 kilometers long, 400 feet below a granite mountain, built by the Soviets to store munitions, tanks, and everything else for an invasion of Western Europe that never happened. Anyways, as the story goes, the Germans acquired it, West Germany, and didn't know what to do with it. They auctioned it, and it was sold for €1.5 million 10 years ago.
Well, that's pretty cheap.
It is pretty cheap. The replacement value today is over $1 billion.
Wow.
So we've partnered up with the guy that bought it, a philanthropist, and we are now doing what is called Europa One. But our original vision was to do it for 2,000-plus people. The problem is, how do you clear and identify which 2,000 are the right people when the hordes are at the gate? It's so well-known, that facility. It's in the history books. So we said, look, we can't have a gate. We're going to have to lock it down, seal it up, have walls that are impenetrable, and revert to the only way in is by helicopter. So Vivos is setting up several helicopters, and we've decided it's got to be a low population. So what does that mean? The cost has got to go up. So effectively, it's a billionaires-only shelter. And I know that everybody has a negative opinion about the rich guy, just for the elite and all that. But, look, they deserve to survive as well, and hopefully we'll be able to go on and do other shelters that can be as affordable as possible. And that's our goal, by the way, is to keep the price as cheap as possible to get as many people in.
Well, and then the other side, though, is that you want to not only have people that may have the finances, but they have to have the skill sets. You have to create a integrated community underground. If you're locked down for years or even decades, you have to have people with medical and other skills, and also teaching skills, so they teach to other people who haven't gone to formal medical or dental school how to do even simple procedures. What people should understand is that we have to have an integrated community, because when you're in lockdown, you're like a pod of humanity trying to survive like an ark. It's like an underground ark. And you have to have the capacity to recycle everything and have skill sets that can take care of each other and entertain each other. And you're like an organism, in other words. And if you don't have all the parts of that organism, it'll become dysfunctional.
Bill, you're exactly right. Bill, I'm sorry to interrupt. You're exactly right, and that's why we would love to have you, and you're an amazing resume and CV as part of the group. We've got some other very distinguished and astounding people, top surgeons, top military people, active duty.
Right.
I even have a Superior Court judge, and I asked him, you don't fit the profile. Why are you applying? He says, look, I sit on the bench, and I see what's going on in the world. And he said, I know that when the shit hits the fan, nobody's going to be there to protect me and my family. So,
right, yeah. Well, what you're doing is you're talking to what I call the steel wool of civilization. Now, if you're a camper, or if you're a prepper or special forces, which I took care of for years, you have steel wool and a little battery in your pocket. You can start a fire anywhere, better than a butane lighter. All you need is a steel wool and a little bit of tinder, and you can literally start any fire. And the steel wool of civilization are people that immediately get it. They see the events. They don't have, one of the statements I like to use is, I don't have an intellectual attachment to my previous levels of stupidity. If I can learn something or realize, oh my gosh, that paradigm was wrong, I don't mind breaking it and moving on. The problem with much of civilization is there's first adopters, which will move pretty quickly, second adopters, but there's a large segment of the population, what I call the clawers and scratchers. You can't convince them, even though things are going to hell in a handcart, like there's no more jet stream. It's gone from North America. The northern jet stream is gone. You can't convince them after the superstorms hit Texas and how the drought. You can't convince them that in Fukushima Daiichi there's no more singing of the orca whales because the North Pacific is dead. It literally is the first stage of what I call a nuclear desertification of the largest ocean on Earth. Now, people need to grasp that term, a nuclear desertification of the oceans. That is a first in terms of even an extinction level event of the history of planet Earth. That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, a lot of people believe, but they also believe the rapture is going to save them, and they don't need a shelter. And for that,
well, first off, this rapture stuff, I stoutly, and I'm a Messianic Christian believer, although if I put my statement of faith, I might get burned at the stake. But I believe in Yeshua Jesus, I believe in God, but I have a much bigger view of God in a vast universe of 460 quadrillion galaxies in our local universe, and God is still God, but he also gave us a brain and responsibility to realize, it's like the old story of there's a disaster coming, and then this guy saw a boat come for him, and he wouldn't get on. Then he saw a helicopter moving on the top of his roof, and he didn't get on the helicopter. And he was figuring that God was going to send an angel to take him away, and finally he dies, and he says, how come you let me die? And he says, I sent a boat and a helicopter. Why didn't you get on them? When we come back, we'll talk with Dave Mitchell, continue this dialogue, and you can call in 800-888-420-9890. I think we have more than one caller back. I want to introduce Dave Mitchell to Robert Vicinio and TerraVivos.com. Now, let's dissect some of the key issues. What's the cost for someone to be involved, or is there a combination of cost and skill sets to get someone into a TerraVivos facility?
Well, the rack rate is $35,000 for an adult and $25,000 for a child. But you're right, we do discount deeply for skill sets. And, each shelter we try to create a village or a group that has a mix of all skills. I mean, for example, being down there without a plumber could be a real disaster. So right. We've got everything from doctors to military and and even housekeepers. So.
Now, what about, there's a couple of areas, because this is something I've pondered for many years, having known some of the chief missile officers inside NORAD, like Colonel Lynn Wills, and worked and actually been in the underground city at Schriever Air Force Base, which is a giant underground city. What people need to realize is that there's been a bifurcation of science in the last century, so that true science, Tier 1 science, is completely bifurcated from even Tier 2 universities across the country. And the people don't realize that all the secret agencies on the planet are all linked together, including Russian, Chinese, whatever, and that they're fully aware that there's something cataclysmic coming to the planet. Tycho Brahe found this basically when he saw the perturbations of outer planets by a deep space object using just Newtonian physics. And I think what people should realize is that, you should realize that it's a major issue that's not being dealt with the public because they have called wargaming it, or population gaining it, which is why they're having things like Jade Helm. Now, Jade Helm has the letters of it actually in the public documents are a simulation of grabbing what's called red list people and actually trying to determine the behavior of humans if they have a cataclysmic event, a major bioweapon release, a major power outage, or a major extreme weather issue, or something like Cumbre Viejo, the super volcano that can actually shove a giant rock off into the ocean, create an 800-foot-high Mach 1 level tsunami that could strike the North American coast and the East Coast, hitting all the nuclear reactors of Britain, Europe, France, Spain, etc., with a giant tsunami. And people are not aware that there's multiple cataclysms, and there's lots of scientific evidence that one or more of them is coming. But the very simplest one is simply the power grid. A year and a half ago, they actually did a study here in California that the power grid won't survive, even putting on the required by legislation amount of solar and wind generators. They have voltage control and frequency controlled systems, and people may not know the science of this, but they just have to take it on faith that we've had scientists on, that they cannot withstand the power surges caused by simply having wind and solar kick in and drop power onto a grid that they haven't got replacement parts for. And even a cyber attack, if we start a major conflict with another country, or let's say ISIS or ISIL get some computer techs, or we tick off the Chinese and the Tianjin army that has 250,000 cybernetic experts that can simply shut our power grid off or hit nodes of it. People are not aware that there is multiple reasons why things are completely crazy.
Well, Bill, you're absolutely right, and that's why they need to prepare. And whether you agree with it or understand it, it's the one form of life insurance or assurance that you really do need. The problem with most people, though, is they want their attitude is, I'll buy the insurance the day before the accident.
Right.
They don't know when the accident's going to be.
Yeah. So. Well, you don't want to do that. I said, I liked your comment that it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. I've got a kind of a follow-up statement you can use as a tagline, because one of my skill sets is trying to be darkly humorous, but also use marketing technology. I would say, you don't build a fireproof building when the place is on fire. You don't wait till it's actually the fire's on. So the judgment that's coming, in a sense, right in the Bible itself, is the judgment of fire, which is, major nuclear war, which is extremely unlikely, considering that Obama's had stopped even communication with the red phone with the Russians. And we have bear bombers that literally go by the east and west coast every week. Within several hundred miles, that could drop hypersonic cruise missiles that could literally strike every U.S. city. Or that the Russians and the Iranians and the Chinese, which are now becoming our mortal enemy, but they just want to trade with us. They don't want to blow up Las Vegas. They want to buy it. They want their son to marry an American girl and come back to Tianjin as their son is an engineer and have kids. They don't want to blow up America. They want to collaborate with it. They want to get all the creative juices from Americans and amplify it 1,000 times in factories in China and sell the stuff back to Americans. People don't get this, do they?
No, they don't. They're not willing to accept what is happening around them. All they know is their iPhone is working, and they can get on Facebook and they can chat, and the mall is open and everything is peachy cozy. Let me tell you a short little thing. I was sitting with a guy in a coffee shop, and he was 80 years old, much older than I. And he asked me what I do, and I told him. And he said, well, that's crazy. And I said, why? He said, this stuff's never going to happen in our lifetime. And I said, really? I said, let me ask you something. Do you work for the government? Are you some kind of specialist for the government that you know? And he said, no. I said, are you a scientist? He said, no. I said, are you an astronomer? And he said, no. I said, oh, then you're a psychic. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, you just made a prediction that this stuff will never happen. He goes, no, I don't mean that. He says, I don't believe it'll happen. I said, well, just because you don't believe it doesn't mean it won't. And that's the problem. 99% of the world's population just is not willing to accept and open their mind to the possibility that this stuff is happening. And it'll be unfortunate for them. The nature...
We have our prepper expert here, Dave, and I want him to ask you a couple questions, too. Dave's been prepping for a long time. He has what I call a level 2 facility already. He's a realtor broker in Southern California and Alpine, which is quite a distance from a large population center. He's got gravity wells. He's got hundreds of acres. That's the possibility there. So tell us, Dave, what questions would you ask Robert Vicino?
Well, where do you have these set up? I mean, are they different states, different parts of the country? Do you do them outside of the country?
Well, as mentioned, we just launched one in Germany, in central Germany, that was originally built by the Soviets. So we have them across America and in Europe at this point. Our goal is to have them everywhere, but it's subject to two things: market interest and time. How many can we build with a limited amount of time we have left?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So what other issues? Right here in Southern California, of course, until people get interviewed, you don't show the locations, obviously. But do you get people that think like I do, Robert, where they think of levels? The first thing I tell people is to contact Dave and Jean Mitchell to at the very least get out of the big cities and do what I call initial level prep. They've got food, water for 3 weeks and so on. But they should also be doing what I call level 2 and 3 prep right now. They shouldn't be, maybe we'll put that off. No, you need to understand here. And I'm not going to set dates, but I'm giving you time windows. And this is the kind of events I see coming, and I can hear the bumper kind of coming up, I think. Yes, it is indeed. The bumper's coming up, so we'll kind of come back. But I see this fall a major economic correction. I see a war in the Middle East heating up like crazy this summer. I see geoclimatic changes that are crazy. I see Fukushima massively increasing the danger of another big release. And much more in the near future. We're talking about before Christmas and before even Halloween. Berkeley had it right when he made those statements. What I tell people is wisdom starts at the end of knowledge. And, I really believe that the God of the universe, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God that transcends religion as we know here on this planet even, is going to give inspiration to mankind so we'll survive an extinction-level event, which is coming and converging on us. It's not just the approach of Nibiru, which is most likely a red dwarf star rather than pushing in the hyperelliptical comets. But it's a convergence also of other disasters. Some of them are man-made or amplified. Some of them are actually amplified, so many of the globalists are actually amplifying them to create enough chaos to distract away from the real issues, which are, if we came together, we could probably have the planet survive a much larger amount of the population. But, unfortunately, the powers that be are trying to primarily save their own hides. And I believe in this kind of a staged level of survival. I think that people need to invest at all three levels. Get out of the big cities, think about community, but also think of deep survival. Dave, if you were to ask Robert Vicino, what other questions would you ask him in terms of going from your place, which is I call level 2, to a level 3 facility? What would be the primary questions you'd ask? Because you have lots of skill sets yourself.
Actually, I haven't really thought much about going underground, but
well, let me act as a proxy for you for the average person out there in the public. The first thing I'd ask is, number one, it seems to me, considering survival, that's pretty affordable, especially if you can get deductions if you have skill sets. It also seems to me that people should realize that they need to understand the signs of the times. The chances that the derivatives market is going to collapse after July when Greece doesn't pay their debt and when the world economy starts to crash this fall, which I don't expect a total crash, but I do expect it to move toward a totalitarian regime, which I actually know firsthand from taking care of the people at the Virtual World Project, Schriever Air Force Base, Fulton, Colorado. The globalists have kind of war gamed us all out to try to have a response to every catastrophe that they see coming, including the programmed and kind of engineered collapse of the economy to get totalitarian control of the population. They know that only a segment of the population is even going to be aware or willing to be aware that disaster is coming to strike the planet. But, to be honest with you, the reason why the Russians nor us would actually start a nuclear war. But when I went underground at Schriever Air Force Base, one of the things they showed us in their 440-seat multimedia theater in 1994, July 10th, was the proliferation of nuclear weapons and also biological weapons. And people realize that the poor man's nuke and nuclear weapons now, almost certainly either by chance or by design, will get into the hands of ISIS or ISIL, and you'll see either radiological dirty bombs or true nuclear weapons inside the continental United States. And if you think it's bad in the airport, imagine turning the entire country into a security zone like the TSA. That's coming, people. They're not just going to ask you to take your shoes off. You're going through terror scanners to go into a shopping center and metal detectors. You'll see people being required to, as I say, jokingly, have mandatory Velcro to your cell phone so they can track your GPS coordinates and monitor. And by the way, they're not just monitoring some of your phone, fax, and email. Everything you've done in every country, including in China, is monitored for every single bit of data through seamless database analysis software. When Snowden came out, I call his name Snowjob. People should be aware that the globalists are trying to control everything because they know that when chaos strikes, it puts them in great danger, doesn't it, Robert?
Yeah, it certainly does. You know, it's funny, Bill. You live in San Diego County, I understand.
I live in North County, so I can look up my patio and I can see Pendleton Marine Corps Base right from my patio window where I'm doing in the studio.
And I live in Del Mar, and I can see the ocean and the big wave when it comes. And Dave lives in the mountains to the east of it, in the same county. Let me say this. Here's my belief. I've just put my house on the market for $4.2 million as of Monday of this week. So I'm putting my dollars where my mouth is, and frankly, getting out of Dodge.
Well, we know what's going on in terms of the drought here. And by the way, I think much of the drought is geoengineered. I don't think it's just a natural cycle, because according to Dr. Easterbrook of the United States and Dr. Habud Adamazatov of the Russian Space Agency, that we're actually heading into a Maunder-type cooling period with the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn that occurs every 180 years. And we should be having an increase in rainfall and a 4 to 5 degree drop in temperature that'll last around 70 years. But we look at the Earth's map for HAARP and for superheating the upper ionosphere. When you look at the drought map, it's cataclysmic. I mean, Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is the largest city in the southern hemisphere, are now in what's called full-force cataclysm. They have a 24 million population city with not enough water to adequately brush your teeth every day and have a shower every day. You got to go twice a week. And water costs are now becoming so dear, it's like the price of gasoline. So where I see things going is not just one problem. It's a convergence of so damn many problems. It's hard for people to kind of keep track of it. And what they do, they're like the deer in the headlights. They just freeze rather than getting off the road. So, for example, one of the things I tell people is you can't be downwind of a nuclear reactor. You can't be on a fault line. If you saw the movie San Andreas last weekend, which I saw, they had some bad science suggesting a tsunami off the coast, which there won't be. There won't be a tsunami off the coast of California, but there will be if even 6 inches of that tectonic force is released in terms of the terajoules involved. There won't be a building standing within 10 to 20 miles of the fault zone. Now, I'm further away from that, so there won't be a tsunami, but what will happen is, at the very least, you'll have no power. Many of these overpasses on the highways will be impassable. Most people don't have off-road vehicles that are high enough to even get through the dirt of going even through Pendleton Marine Corps Base, trying to go over land. And what do you do if you get over land and you head toward Arizona? You're heading into a desert in Death Valley. So, things are going to get beyond nuts. And a lot of people don't realize that after the fourth day, if I was going to make a special movie, I would call it the fourth day. The third day, you run out of dog food. The fourth day, they advise you that on the radio, on the emergency channel, that they had to cut back water because they can't treat the sewage, because none of the sewage treatment plants in any Western nation has power backup. And I've worked war games with military experts and other people to know that we are beyond stupid in terms of our levels of maintenance of the power grid, or even the treatment of things that will allow civilization to exist. So when they stop pumping gasoline, you can't drive your vehicle. When you stop having water on the fourth day, when your food's all rotten and people don't have food supplies and they start roving and trying to grab other people's food, within weeks, it will make the movie, Fury Road from the latest Road Warrior movie look like a camping expedition. It will make it look like that is nothing compared to what's coming. What do you think?
I think people are going to be very sorry they didn't find a solution and prepare in advance.
Right, it's going to be beastly, to be the best term. And as an emergency trauma doctor, I've seen human beings do things that wild animals with a cortical-eating virus disease like, rabies wouldn't do. But human beings, when they're desperate and they're hungry and there's vile things going on, they become pretty brutish. People need to understand that.
Yeah, they're going to pray for a bullet, but that bullet's going to be for themselves, not for...
It'll be like in the Bible. It says, they shall wish for death, but death shall flee from them. Yeah, in other words, it'll be such a desperate situation in terms of hopelessness that they shall wish to die quickly with a situation that's desperate.
Bill, I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
We've been working on a new television show, and
Right.
it's the theme is to finding the safest place on the planet. And notice I said safest because there is no safe place. But let me ask you something. With all your knowledge, what do you consider to be the safest place on the planet to ride out these events?
Do you want me to give you a list of the top 3 or 4 that I would say?
Yeah. Yeah.
The first safest place, believe it or not, is east of the Rocky Mountains in Canada. That's number 1. Second safest place would be in some of the areas off of New England and places like Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and northern Quebec. Because what's going to happen is the continental lithospheric slip will actually move the continents down so that North America will be 1,200 miles further south. The other areas that will be safe will be Ecuador, northern Brazil, Patagonia, like Guatemala, like some of the places there, Chile, Venezuela, and those areas. I think islands would be unsafe because I think there's going to be a lot of tsunami-like activity that will occur, especially in the Atlantic Ocean. But those tsunami areas, the tsunamis, it's relatively easy to be 100 miles inland away from a tsunami and not be struck by them. You don't want to be downwind of a nuclear reactor, so anything along the east coast of the United States is bad because there's so many nuclear reactors. You don't want to be near a fault line zone like the New Madrid system or anywhere, even in South America near fault line zones. You don't want to be in an area where you have giant populations that will have to leave very quickly, like in China, heading toward the inland China area once the coastal areas become uninhabitable. For example, if most of the reactors in South Korea and Japan go just because of a power outage or a major disaster, the cyclonic winds will dump a lot of that radiation back on China and the coastal areas of those areas. And of course, if the Bashar reactors hit, I belonged to the Physicians for Social Responsibility for over 40 years, and the amount of radiation to be dumped along Myanmar and southern China and Japan and heading toward North America will be cataclysmic. So those are the areas that I'd say are probably safest. I probably would not pick a place in Europe anywhere. I would think that some areas of Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, might be safe in sub-Saharan Africa. There are probably some countries that were there, like formerly what used to be called Rhodesia and South Africa and those areas. I wouldn't want to be in any country that's, quote, Muslim or has a large Muslim population because they have a very apocalyptic view of this, and their attitude towards Sharia law is probably almost as dangerous as the approach in Nibiru. So that's kind of my analysis of it. It's kind of a quick and dirty analysis. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. I think the key factors would be high ground, inland, low population.
Exactly.
And in my case, I think it's Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, Southern Hemisphere, believe it or not, my first choice, believe it or not, is Northern Hemisphere, north of the United States, in the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains. That's number 1, believe it or not.
We have a shelter there.
I bet you do. We need to talk some
Bill,
more.
I hope you can join us at Vivos. It was nice to...
Definitely want to talk. We'll talk further. And Dave, we'll have you back on to discuss it with Gene and get some jokes as well. This is a scary topic. We have to salt it with a little humor. Hopefully have Gene on when we return. Thank you, Robert Vicinio of TerraVivos.com and Dave and Gene Mitchell. Check it out on our website. They're the best realtor brokers in the world to get you out of the big cities and get you to a level 2 facility, which we want to build all over the world. But remember, level 3, Terra Vivos, should be in your future.
Forecasting.